Adam, thank you very much for making time to share your insights into the future of leadership. But before we go into leadership, can you share your own journey with us? Where did you grow up?
Well, Nick, I grew up in the UK, right on the outskirts of London, in a place called Bromley, which is on the commuter belt to London.
And what was your dream career as you grew up?
My dream career was I wanted to be a fighter pilot. And I'm not sure why that was, but I had this very romantic view of what a great career would be, and I quite fancied being an RAF pilot.
And so where did your career take you?
In a completely different direction. I didn't get remotely close to becoming a fighter pilot. My younger years didn't get off to a great start. My father passed away when I was 8 years old, and my mother passed away when I was 17. And I was one of 4 siblings, and I was the second in the pecking order. And when one loses one's parents very early in life, I think that I could have gone in a completely different direction to how things have turned out. And I was very fortunate in terms of what I managed to do and the opportunities that I had after I lost my mother.
So which opportunities did open up?
Well, my mother passed away when I was just about 6 months before I did my A-levels at school, or my matric as it would have been in South Africa. And we weren't particularly, in fact, we weren't at all a wealthy family. We were a middle-class family, and I wanted to go to university. Nobody in my family had ever gone to university. And I was very lucky that a company called British Gas, which in the UK was a great big parastatal, that offered a sponsorship program for young people to get into university. And I applied, I was successful, and they gave me a break. In particular, what was so useful was that they gave me a year after I completed my A-levels to spend a year learning in the enterprise environment of British Gas, which employed about 90,000 people, before I went to university. And I have to say that my fortune really was assured at that stage, because I didn't get my A-level grades that I needed. I had all sorts of excuses, but they managed to negotiate with the university to get me in, and that was my first very lucky break, I think, in life.
So how did you get from gas into IT?
Yes, well, as I was going through what became a 5-year scholarship with British Gas, my first degree was in management and computer science. So I'd set a path at the beginning of wanting to pursue in the late 1980s an IT-centric career. And there were very few options back then to do that. But when I returned to British Gas, and by the way, at British Gas, my 5 years was called a marketing scholarship, which so I had management, IT, and marketing combined. And I had an executive at British Gas as my mentor. And as I graduated and went back to British Gas, and the company had just been privatised, my mentor surprised me enormously by pulling me into his office and telling me to leave the company. And I said, well, my goodness, have I done something wrong? And he said, no, you've done everything right. You now need to go and broaden your experience, and I'm telling you now to leave. And I had an opportunity with Anderson Consulting, which today is called Accenture, which was a very IT-centric beginning to my career. And I managed to build on that experience into more of a strategic and business-oriented career.
So looking back over your career, Adam, was there a turning point?
Nick, there were, in all honesty, and I guess my career spans now 3 decades, so it doesn't feel like that. But there have been many turning points. There have been many opportunities and positives. There have been many disappointments and failures. And if I think back, there's some really pivotal moments. Probably the earliest one, as I went through my career with Andersen Consulting, was when I decided that I would leave Andersen to go and undertake an MBA. And I went off to Lausanne in Switzerland to IMD, and I studied for a year with 82 other people from 45 different countries, and it taught me so much, and I learned so much from my fellow MBAers during the year. And what led from that immediately was the pivot point during the year of coming to South Africa for the first time in 1996. And recognizing that we were 2 years into our young democracy here, I really found something very exciting in South Africa that I wanted to be part of. And so the second turning point was deciding to come to South Africa in 1997 and start my career here.
And tell us, Adam, who inspired you throughout your career to keep on keeping on?
Well, if I think back, there's been many inspirational people. Probably the one that really led me here in the first place was Nelson Mandela. My university, the University of Warwick, was a very active and politically engaged university, and we had a bar called the Nelson Mandela Bar, and I actually met my wife in that bar on the university campus, and she came with me to South Africa. And Nelson Mandela's leadership and the role that he's played in creating the platform for South Africa, and this year, of course, we celebrate his 100th birthday, and recognise his centenary, which I think is very, very important. But he really had a significant inspiration for drawing me to South Africa.
And Adam, what is driving you today?
Very different things drive me today. I have two children, two teenage children of 17 and 15, and family is a very important part of my life. But if my family were here, they would tell you otherwise, that my work and my time at IQbusiness over the last 9 years is what really drives me forward. And at IQbusiness, there are 700 family members that are here, and we have a very clear purpose and a role to play in creating an impact in the societies that we work in the clients that we engage with. And it's that impact that, in all honesty, really drives me and gives me so much energy on a day-to-day basis.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what that impact is?
Yes, it's in order to answer that question, I think I have to explain that IQbusiness is 20 years old this year. And I've been here for 9 years. And in the last 9 years, we've really crystallized our purpose as an organization and the role that we play, which is beyond being a for-profit, independent and privately owned company, into ensuring that we understand the role that we play in driving and creating growth in the societies, in the environments in which we operate. And part of that is driven by the discomfort of being in what I think we can still call today a zero growth economy. we're outlooking at this point the potential of 1.5% GDP growth, but we have to get above 2% in order to stop losing jobs in South Africa, and above 3% to absorb the product of our education system in South Africa. And so the impact that we want to have is to stimulate growth in our economy and to ensure that there is a future for the young people in South Africa and for the more experienced people in South Africa, for that matter, because if we don't get our growth rate up, then there is no future.
Absolutely. Now, Adam, let us move into leadership. And I know it's a big question, but what does the future of leadership mean to you?
I must admit, I've thought about this a lot over the last few years. In fact, I had a debate about it with a group of CEOs this morning, and we were talking about social leadership as a drive. And I was talking to some people from LinkedIn about their perspectives on the need for leaders to develop social enterprises. Even if your business is a for-profit enterprise, it needs to understand its role in society. I actually would like to take it a step further, and I think the future of leadership goes back to that very important word that I used of impact. That it's not just about being a social leader or a sociable leader. It's about being a leader that creates social impact and extending the role of the organization to ensure that we understand and deliver on the outcomes that need to be achieved beyond our business. And I think that's what leadership is about, and one cannot avoid in the process of becoming an activist. And I think it's a very important word as a CEO to consider one's role in speaking out on the contemporary issues that we face, and not just being critical of the issues that we face, but providing constructive criticism on how we tackle those issues and how we move society forward. And so that, to me, is what the future of leadership is all about.
So, Adam, what have you learned from your own journey that you consider really important for building future leaders?
In my own journey, I think probably some of the biggest failures that I've experienced have taught me the greatest lessons. And some of the biggest failures were not of my own making, but I was part of them. So, for example, I spent 9 years with Dimension Data, and Dimension Data still to this day has the unenviable position of having had the greatest corporate write-offs in South African history. Steinhoff probably is going to beat that, and Data can move on from that role in history. But massive amount of change and challenge in Data's history, and then being part of rebuilding and leading the role that I played in driving Dimension Data's success forward as part of the new team that was there. And then secondly, in the role that I played at Supergroup, which was a very, very challenging role that showed me really and exposed me to what can happen when business trust and trust as a value breaks down, and when a rescue situation turns into a life or death scenario. And it really taught me that people really will do anything to protect their financial position. And a very, very uncomfortable 14, 15 months that I spent there, but I probably learned the most in my career from going through that kind of a situation.
Now, Adam, when you speak to future leaders, what do you tell them they should focus on for future-proofing their career?
Firstly, I would say to them there's no such thing as future-proofing your career. There are so many changes that are happening, and it's so difficult to predict the road ahead. The only thing I think one can do is, in the first instance, make sure that you are authentic in your approach. If you are not authentic, if you're not able to be natural in the role that you're playing, then you simply won't survive. If you're having to come to work every day and put a facade on, or to display an impression that is an unnatural one, then it is energy sapping. So there's no way you can do that. So be authentic. I think constantly learn and find opportunities to learn and get exposed to new experiences, to new people. Build one's network is probably the most important thing. And I think thirdly, take time to reflect from time to time, and pause and think about what experiences have led to where you are today, and what opportunities potentially could take you forward.
Now, Adam, looking at technology, what do you believe are the key technologies that will be driving the leadership of the future?
Well, I think everybody is feeling somewhat threatened at the moment by artificial intelligence and machine learning, and the changes that we're seeing happening. I heard somebody talking about how lawyers at the moment are feeling very, very threatened by and soon will be replaced by artificial intelligence. And not only the speed of what AI can do, but the accuracy and the information that can be stored. So I think artificial intelligence is going to have a major drive. We're deeply involved at the moment in what everybody seems to embrace as the digital revolution, and the convergence of the virtual world with the physical world, and the amalgam that's creating. And I think all of us are walking around with our phones and continual access to the internet, and beginning to appreciate the impact that has, and the new business models that are being created from that. And then I think the third area, from a technology perspective, is in terms of data and intelligence and security, that we're all experiencing, and pretty much every week there's a new drama of news about the break-in or the exposure of information, or this week, just in the last week, the launch in Europe of the data protection regulations that really are creating a big drive and a big change to the way we can operate and the information that we share. So I think those, for me, are probably the three areas that are really driving a significant impact on our daily lives today, and will continue into the future.
Now, Adam, when you speak to future leaders, how do you suggest they should use social media for building their own leadership brand?
Well, I think social media plays a very important role in certainly in understanding trends and activities, and also I think participating in those and having a say. I spend a fair amount of time following certain trends and activities on Twitter, and LinkedIn for me as a business network is just invaluable. I think it's important to, going back to what I was saying about being an activist, is to pick the subject matters and areas of interest, and then to participate in vocalizing thoughts and ideas, in engaging in conversation, in sharing information. And I've, through my own activity, realized how important that profile can be. And also recognize that if you, as we've seen, if you stick your neck out too far, or if you want to stick your neck out, you expect to get it chopped off. And there are many individuals out there that are very derogatory and negative, and you mustn't take it personally.
Right. Now, Adam, in your leadership journey, and you alluded to a number of mentors in your own life, can you maybe share a success story where you mentored somebody and that person took your advice to heart?
Well, that's an interesting one to think about. Yes, I can, which I have to say, it surprised me that this person actually took my my advice to heart. He was a South African who had gone up to Sandhurst in the UK and had studied and became an officer in the British Army. And he decided to leave the British Army, and he came back to South Africa. And he said to me that he was deciding to do an MBA and wanted to use my advice and thoughts and ideas on where he should pursue it. And he was contemplating going back to the UK or going to INSEAD or elsewhere. And I don't know how the conversation happened, but the conversation turned to him potentially going to China and being one of the first students of a Chinese MBA. It would involve him having to learn Mandarin. But we convinced each other that as an ex-British officer in the British Army, that going to China and studying an MBA there and then coming back to South Africa and getting engaged with Chinese companies that are seeking to expand their presence here could be an amazing marketplace, a much more focused and limited marketplace than just going into the general MBA marketplace. Anyway, about 6 months later, he called me and he said, "I'm off to Shanghai." And I said, "Really?" He said, "Yes, I took your advice. I've been learning Mandarin. I have managed to get a bursary from Standard Bank, because when I told them my story, they said, 'Come and here's a bursary.'" And he went off to Shanghai and completed his MBA, which, as I said, surprised me that idea, that seed, actually did germinate, and off he went and took that advice.
So, Adam, who are the role models of leadership that you suggest future leaders should study and maybe learn from?
Let me pick three. One that was pivotal for me early in my career, which is a long time ago in my career, and actually the leader was a long time, and that was Ernest Shackleton. When I read the story of Ernest Shackleton and his Antarctic experience, of how he led his ship and it became marooned in the ice, and how he had to lead his crew back to safety without losing anybody, was just an amazing story. And I think it's a very easy read, and it's a fantastic story to read. I think in bringing things up to the modern day, I've learned a lot from Mark Benioff, who is the CEO and founder of Salesforce.com, the biggest technology cloud company in the world. And I'll give you one example of what I've learned from him, was his approach to philanthropy and creating a social enterprise and creating what we are now as a B corporation at IQbusiness. I've learned a lot from his approach, and we've actually adopted many of the things. I have no shame in borrowing or stealing with pride, as long as it gets attributed back. And Mark, I've learned a lot from, and I had the privilege of meeting him on one occasion. And then thirdly, more recently, from a lady called Gail Kelly. And Gail Kelly is a very successful South African and became CEO of one of the biggest banks in Australia. She's a mother of four, and has, in her career, has been supremely successful and led a very balanced life. And I think she's a real inspiration. And she's written a book recently, and Live, Life, Learn is her book, and it's really I think it's really got some great perspectives on modern leadership, and I think very importantly female leadership, because I think the male leaders of this world, myself included, can learn a great deal from our iconic female leaders.
Absolutely. So, Adam, how can our listeners get hold of you, and how can they connect with you?
Well, I'm based here at the IQ Business Park in Rivonia. My Twitter handle, which is quite active, is at Craker AS, and that's CrakeRAS. And then at the IQ Business Park, my email address is acraker@iqbusiness.net, or just call me here. That would be a pleasure to talk.
And Adam, last but not least, is there one piece of advice that you would really like to convey to future leaders that they should implement in their own leadership?
One piece of advice, I guess, is try to stay and be humble in your leadership, and admit the mistakes. There's the most humbling approach one can take is to admit when you're wrong, and not to be afraid to be humbled by being proven to be wrong.
Well, Adam, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your wisdom, and for helping us to build a better future.
It's a great pleasure, Nick.
Thank you.
Thank you.